Welcome to Intro to Cypress Testing. I'll be your host, Kyle Coberly. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to write basic assertions in Cypress, and you should be able to write basic actions in Cypress. Okay, so this first part I want us to do together because it takes forever. So we're going to let this run in the background while we get a little bit more context around this. So follow along with me. Get a terminal up. All right, so step one, we're going to make a new folder. I don't care what you call it. We'll call it Cypress Testing Lesson. Cool. Step one. Step two, we're going to make a new node project. So we'll do npm init-y. Step two. We are going to npm Install Cypress. Step three. So this one takes a little bit of time, but the fourth step is the real doozy. Cool. And then last step, npx Cypress open. Cool. And even on my computer, that's probably going to take a while. Oh, looks like you got it. Cool. Look at all those beautiful tests. Getting greens all over the place. All right, cool. So I imagine that yours is probably taking longer. Not a typo, that's npx, not npm. All right, so there's our steps. So while that's running in the background, let's talk about what we're doing. So we want to write basic Cypress assertions and write basic Cypress actions. So testing. I'd mentioned this morning that if you can do one kind of testing, you should probably be able to do end-to-end testing. A lot of testing stuff will start with unit testing, and all of a sudden we're like waist deep in all this like, what's the difference between those? I didn't realize there's so many different kinds of testing. Let's talk about what those are. This is often represented as a pyramid that has end-to-end testing here, unit testing here, and any variety of things in here. Sometimes there's like 3 or 4 things in here. Sometimes there's just integration. And we can kind of think of this as a little bit of a continuum. Stuff like this, we could call like black box testing, or in our case, since we make web apps, call it browser testing. Or, but at any rate, it does all of its shit through the browser directly. It doesn't know anything about your code. It doesn't know what language your project is in. It doesn't care. It's basically pretending to be a user and automating all the things that a user would do. Down here at unit testing, we have like, all right, if I call this function, does the right output come back? So call that like function calls. or methods. So like if I call this method on this object, does the object state change the way that I expect it to? So we'll call that kind of stuff unit testing. A unit can be a function, it can be a method, it can be a class, but it's some small tiny piece of the application that we're testing in isolation to make sure that it does the thing that we expect it to do. Browser testing is like being a pretend user and making sure the application as a whole works the way that we expect it to. And the stuff in between is like some, is a spectrum between those things. So it might be, all right, do all of these units function together the way that I kind of expect them to? It could be like an end-to-end thing, but some parts of the application are faked out a little bit. Like it's pretty common to fake out the back end. So you can just test the front end in isolation. It's technically more of an integration test than an EDE. Now, my question for you, why on earth would such a thing be represented as a pyramid? Why is it small up here and big down here? Any guesses?
Maybe how many tests you'd have to write. If you're doing unit, you'd have to write a lot of tests.
Yeah, absolutely. So we generally expect to have more down here and fewer up here. Now, I'm really going to drop a bomb on you. So why fewer? If the end-to-end test works, that is the application. If all of your end-to-end tests pass, that should mean that your app does exactly what users expect it to do. So who gives a shit about the rest of it? Any guesses why we tend to see fewer end-to-end tests and more unit tests?
Your thin vertical slices typically will contain a lot more, a single feature, but a lot of units. So you're only using one thing, even though there's a lot of components under the hood.
Totally true. So let me rephrase the question like this. So all of those little units, they represent like potential different paths through the code, right? Well, like your end-to-end features should also like represent all those paths of the code, or the paths of the code don't do anything. So with that in mind, why even those like little tiny units, why wouldn't I test those through the end-to-end features that have them? Why is it so common to do that less?
I have a guess.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like a lot of times tests are written to sort of solve a problem. And so when you're trying to do like an overarching sort of feature test, if it breaks, it's likely due to a small piece breaking. And it's a good idea to write a test to be able to solve, like focus in on that problem and solve that problem. And then make sure that if it happens again, you have a test in place to catch it.
Oh, I love that. It's almost like you're a teacher or something. So one way you could think of that kind of thing is, let's say we have this end-to-end test as one big loop. And then within this, we have smaller loops that might represent integration tests. And then off of those, we have even smaller loops that maybe represent our unit tests. So you start by trying to get this big one to work. And you go, well, I don't even know where to start on that. So you break it down into successively smaller problems that are like integration tests. And then you break those down into these little unit tests. And the cool thing about that is that when you get all of these little tests to pass, well, then your middle test pass and your big test passes. So like that particular philosophy of testing is called outside-in testing. But there's still one thing we're missing from this testing pyramid, something that changes. Still haven't hit it yet. Has to do with the tests themselves. Speed. End-to-end tests historically are snail fucking slow versus unit tests, which are crazy fast. And so I guess this should be like inverse, but we expect these to run a lot slower than these. Now, I'm going to qualify that by saying that when this testing pyramid was conceived, which was like 20 years ago or so, that was more true then than it is now. I think like modern end-to-end tests are like substantially faster than they were. And the raw time that they run in matters quite a bit because these are your feedback loops. You're using these to help figure out like, all right, is my software working the way that I think it does? And if this takes too long, then you stop using the tests. And if you're not using the tests, well, then who cares if they exist or not? So there's like a phrase called the 10-minute build that you should be able to build all your software in 10 minutes. And like that sounds like crazy for the kind of things that we make. It's still, even in like big production apps, building all of the little pieces takes a long time. Well, we have a similar rule with testing that like, if you can't run a test suite quickly, then you stop using it. Now, one of the cool things about Cypress, the tool we're going to be talking about today, this is like kind of in this zone. It does a little bit of end-to-end stuff. It also does integration stuff reasonably well. And I would say that it is fast as hell. Like I would even use Cypress to write unit tests sometimes. But due to the nature of this, we do tend to see a little bit more of these and a little bit less of these. All right, one last question, then we're going to get our hands dirty. I said this morning that if you could only do one of these, I would say end-to-end tests are probably a pretty good place to start. Any guesses why I would say such a bizarre thing?
Maybe just thinking big picture. We're still working on getting all our putting features together. So having like an end-to-end would be a good place for us to start. Just figuring it all out.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. A couple other things I'd throw on there is that unit tests are super easy to write. Like the syntax, you guys have seen me do them in a couple demonstrations before. There's nothing too crazy about them. Writing a meaningful unit test that actually helps you is very difficult. It's so much more than syntax. It's a whole philosophy. And just slapping a bunch of unit tests on something, you can do it and it won't give you any more confidence in your software. And then you're going to fall out of love with testing. And that's the last thing I want. I want you to love testing because testing's awesome. So end-to-end testing, there is a lot of philosophy and stuff around this, but you can start with exactly what you would do to test whether or not a feature works. You can model out, well, I go to this page and I click on this thing and then I see if this thing shows up on the page. You can write those as statements in Cypress. And so it's just automating the thing that you're already doing. I think that makes this a really handy place to start. Cool. Before we get into the meat of this and start writing Cypress assertions and actions, what questions do you have for me?
So I'm guessing that end-to-end is much more beneficial for vertical slice working, or okay.
That is your vertical slice. Like a complete end-to-end test, that is your vertical slice. Cool, let's get dirty. So if you, assuming all your stuff installed, and if it didn't, these are the steps we're looking at right here. Making a folder, we're moving into it, make a new NPM project, install Cypress, npx Cypress open, if you missed it. All right, so if we run that npx Cypress open command, what we should see is something that looks kind of like this. So all of these are different test files that they auto-installed for us. When it goes, oh, cool, you haven't run this before, we're going to give you a bunch of examples that show how this works. You can click on an individual one. Most of the time, I'll run all specs up here. And then what you should see is something that looks an awful lot like a fake browser, because it is a fake browser. You should see all of these little tests on the side. And you see it doing things like typing into these forms and clicking on stuff. And as each one of them works, it goes green. This website, like, you can go to it. It's just a regular website in the browser. We're making the browser do things and then asserting that they did the thing that we think that they did. We can stop these at any time with the stop button. And let's get that far. Try to get this working, see if you can get some of the green check marks to show up. You don't have to write anything yet. We're just watching their test run. Give that a shot. Holler if you got any problems.
So is Cypress just for pure JavaScript front end, or can you also do on the server side too on this, or does it have to be a browser on it?
Great question, Tony. So Cypress doesn't care. All Cypress cares about is that it shows up in a browser. So it is operating just like you would as a user. You go to pages, you click on stuff, you follow links. And so your backend might be Go or C++ or Ruby. Your front end might be React or Vue or Vanilla or just HTML and CSS. Like, Cypress doesn't care about that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Which is one of the other things that makes, like, learning this tool in particular so useful is there's a host of testing tools for JavaScript. There's a host of testing tools for Ruby. And a lot of the ideas really do transfer pretty well between them. This one tool will work with any website or web app. Cool. Before we move on, I want to see an affirmative. Give me a thumbs up if this is working. Working for Michael, working for Haley, working for Brooke, working for Tony, working for Logan. Excellent. So we can go ahead and go back out of this, stop the runner, and Control-C to kill this. So they actually give you a pretty good example of all the different things that Cypress can do. If you go into the Cypress folder under integration and examples, these are all Cypress tests. So I'd encourage you to play around with the syntax and check out some of the neat things you can do in here. But we're going to blow all this out. So I want you to go into this Cypress folder, integration, examples. We're going to delete the entire examples folder. We don't need it. So RM, RF, examples. And then we're going to make something called like lesson.spec.js. So hierarchy now is from our root folder, Cypress, integration, and an empty file called lesson.spec.js. I'd recommend having your having at least 2 terminals open for this. So I want one that's actually running your tests. So we can do that npx Cypress open command and just leave that running in there. And then we'll use this one as our text editor. Cool.
So I think I lost you right after deleting the examples.
Okay. So it made this Cypress folder for us when we ran npx Cypress open. It made all these folders, put all the shit in them. this integration folder had an examples folder that we got rid of, and I made this lesson.spec.js file. It doesn't have anything in it right now. You good, Brooke?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Cool. Let's take a look inside that folder, or in this lesson spec file. So the syntax on writing one of these tests is borrowed from Mocha. It's a little bit cryptic, and we don't need to talk too much about how it works just yet. But man, I'm trying to think of how I want to show you this. Let's do it with test. So we're going to do test, and test takes in 2 arguments, a string and a function. That's it. The test is going to be the name of the thing that we want to test. So we'll call this maybe, let's test Google. So we'll call this like Google's page loads. We have this function here, and inside of it, we're going to, like, think about the steps that you would follow to get one of Google's pages to load. Like, talk me through it. What's step 1?
Open a browser.
Open a browser. Then what?
Type in google.com.
Cool. And then how do I know that the page loaded?
Can you check for the header or
Sure.
for the name?
Something kind of like this, right? So how we would write this in Cypress, this like open a browser and type in google.com. We can actually do that with sci. Don't need to import it or anything. It's just magically available. Sci.visit. Like that. That's going to tell the fake browser to go to google.com. And then if we want to check that the thing showed up, let's see what that would actually look like. All right, so maybe see this image is there. Cool, so now I got to figure out something to select this off of. Let's see if that ID, HP logo, if that is consistent. If I refresh, is it still that? It is. Cool, so maybe I test to see if something with the ID of HP logo is there. So in Cypress, I do that like this. Sci.get, and then just any CSS selector. It can be simple, it can be complex, it can be whatever. So HP logo. And then the way I do the assertion is I do .should, and then I can say what should be the case with that. I can say that it should have text, it should have some attribute, but I can also just say it should exist. So if I pull up the runner for this, oh shoot, it doesn't have test. I thought it did. Fuck. All right, slight change. So we're gonna do one called describe. And we'll just say Google. And then this one is gonna be called it. And we put them inside of each other like that. So if all the other stuff is deleted, it looks like that. We change that to like it loads the page. All right, how you like me now? There we go. Cool. I got a green check mark. I got Google showing up there. So ask me some questions about this. So something I'll call out about this, these tend to have two parts to them. Something where you get some element and then an assertion you make about that element. Some other ones might be like, maybe I want to check that button. So I can say something like, let's see, how can I select this? Let's try getting it by, see if that class stays consistent. I'll bet it does. Yep, it does. All right, so let's say I grab it by that class. I could say something like should have text, and then I can put something wrong in so that I can see it fail. Oh no, didn't have it. So I could, ooh, there was more than one that it matched. Okay, that probably makes it not as good as a selector. This is a little bit like redundant, but if I did, oh, if I did this. I can also find something that contains a particular phrase. See if that matches one. Oh, and it's going to be value, not text. So I could say something like that. See if that works. Yep, worked. So we can do that. We can do stuff by attributes and lots of other things.
Can you just like rewind really quick?
Yeah.
From when you like changed and then how you got your test to run?
Sure. So let's rewind all the way. So let's do a different site. Pick one, Haley.
Facebook.
Facebook. Ooh, I can't do Facebook because
You blocked yourself.
because I blocked myself.
Maybe Instacart.
All right. All right, cool, perfect. So Haley, give me an idea of how I would start a test for this.
Well, could you describe like what exactly it is?
It doesn't do anything. It's just a way to group things. So if I want to give you an example of like real ones, how about, cool. So like for this one, you can use these describes to group stuff. You can nest them arbitrarily. Your actual test is the it. So that's a test described as a grouping. Does that answer your question, Haley?
Yeah, and then when so we created it, and then did you just run npx Cypress open?
Yeah, in fact, I didn't even change it. I just had it open from when we had all the like tests and stuff running before, those example ones.
But you didn't
It'll
have to
see
like,
your changes in real time.
okay. Did we have to do something to somehow connect this lesson.spec.js? Because mine's not picking up.
Yeah. It might be in the wrong place then. So this is a really common Cypress mistake, is you have to be in the top level of your folder when you run npx Cypress open. Otherwise, it adds that Cypress folder from whatever folder you're currently in. And so like sometimes, like especially if you were in one of the Cypress folders to delete the example files or something, and then you ran the command in there, it'll just keep creating these files. But in here, if I do npx Cypress open, it should just find everything for you. Like that. And now it's saying it can't find any tests in my files. As we like update the spec file, it should find them.
So I think I might have been in the wrong file when I tried to delete. What file should I have been in to remove the example? Okay, give me 1 second. Let me swap to my Mac.
I'm getting like super sci-fi vibes right now.
Because you can see two of me. Okay. You can see it, yeah.
Yep. So this is why. So your lesson.spec.js, it needs to be in that same integration folder that the examples folder was in. So if you open up Cypress, go to the integration folder, get rid of all those examples.
Okay. So I just wasn't down further far enough when what is that, Cypress? That would make sense.
Yep. And then RMRF examples.
RM-RF?
Yep. Cool. Now move your lesson spec file into that integration folder. Beautiful.
Okay.
Cool. Now pull up Cypress.
So not in the integration folder.
Yes, correct. Cool.
I think you got to close your parentheses.
Yeah, now you just have a syntax problem, but it's fine again.
Okay. Oh, okay. Cool. But at least it worked. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Other questions? Oh, actually, hang on. Let's finish the example we were doing. So we have Instacart up. Haley, give me an idea of how I get this started. I have this empty file here. She muted.
Can you ask your question again? I had to switch headphones.
No problem. How do I get started with testing this Instacart thing?
So it looks like you do describe.
Yep.
Then our first argument could be Instacart.
Sure.
And then
What's the second argument?
it's gonna be invoking an argument or a function. So like empty parentheses, sad arrow, curlies.
Cool. Careful though, we're not invoking a function. We're passing the function in as an argument. It's first class function. We could also have made that a standalone function, So you like that, and then make this like that. Just needs to be a function definition.
So passing a function.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so we do that, and then we need to do a very similar thing. What's the word this time?
We're going to keep it
It.
or did we just?
It. So also takes a string and a function. It is the actual test. So Logan, give me an idea of like something we could test on this page.
We could type into the address or zip code.
We can. We're gonna do that next. That's an action, just something that already exists on the page.
Groceries delivered in as little as 1 hour exists.
Perfect. So what's the name for that it going to be? I guess that works. Let's see. It shows groceries delivered in 1 hour or less. Because it's supposed to read like a sentence. Describe Instacart. Well, it shows groceries delivered in 1 hour or less. It's supposed to be very like natural language. So it takes in a function as its second argument. Now, Michael Navoy, give me an idea of what I need to type to assert that that's true.
So you got to visit the website.
Yep. Sci.visit. Okay, then what?
Inspect the element that you're trying to, I guess, test, and then pick something out that you can test against.
Yeah. So, see, this is in an H1. I kind of wonder if it's I bet it's at least the first H1. Let's see if we can target it that way. All right, so I've gotten that element. Now what do I do?
Should have value or contain or?
Let's do have text.
Okay. And then the text that you're looking for.
Yep. Awesome. And if I try to run that, oops. So I got it wrong. Green. That's how we make an assertion about something that's on the page. So this also works with dynamic stuff. If we're like, it should have this thing that only shows up when you do this thing correctly. Should say you won. Should say you lost. All those are just static assertions about the page. And that's how they work. Ask me some questions about that.
This might be dumb, but like, what did you choose to have dot text versus have dot value?
So the other one was a button. Buttons have values, not text content, technically. Or sorry, it was an input that was like of type button. Yeah, inputs have values.
Gotcha.
So this is just testing like that there are things on a page. But what about like if you have a form and you want to say like if they put their info in and submitted it, like it.
That is That's our
Nice.
second objective.
Okay.
So clicking on things, typing things, those are our Cypress actions or Cypress commands. Cool, your turn. I want you to pick any site. Actually, let's all do the same site. I'll make this easier. Give me another one. Fine, Drizzly. Reminds me I gotta order shit for happy hour tonight. All right, we want to assert that beer, wine, and liquor delivered to your doorstep shows up correctly on the page. Do it. You got 4 minutes. Go. You're gonna Slack me your test code when you're done.
Kyle, can you repeat the directions real quick? My internet cut out.
Oh, sure. You're going to go to the Drizzly site, and you're going to assert that this shows up at the top. And you're going to write the test for that, and then you're going to Slack me your test code. All right, give me a fist to 5. Fist is, I don't know what the fuck we're supposed to be doing. 5 is, I got it done. Just get a sense of where we're at time-wise. Cool, keep working. Give it another minute or so. If you're done, even if like you're tapping out, Slack me your test code. All right, pencils down. Slack me what you got, even if it's not working yet. So a couple things I noticed. And a couple of you that did it with the P selector, and like, that'll totally work. Check out what that would look like. So if I describe drizzly. It shows the tagline. I might say visit the site. And then I might try to get that element with like the p tag, and then say that it should have text like that. Interesting. So I tried to get the p tag, and it found this one and 86 more. Eesh. So what was the problem? '87 matched elements.
Not targeted enough.
Not targeted enough. So I have a couple ways I can do that. I can take a look and see if there's something more specific I can target. All right, so it's got this class. Like anytime you see something like that, somebody didn't write that out. That's auto-generated. That makes it kind of brittle and not super good for testing. It works fine for this lesson. I just don't want it to be the case that no one told you that that's not going to work. Because as soon as you update the site, it all falls apart. Oops, did I get the wrong one? Ah, it also matches this one. Check it out. The text was, how Drizzly works. Beer, wine, and liquor delivered to your door. Become a Drizzly retailer. All of those have that same one. Gasp. So here's another way we can do this. I can, so this is in the nav, and it is a, ooh, this is good. Top bar component, which is a data hypernova key. So maybe I grab that. I don't know if you realize you can do this with CSS selectors. It's kind of cool. You can target that any attribute of an HTML element has like some particular thing by putting it in square brackets. So I can say something like that, that has a nav and has a p tag inside of it. Maybe. What if, let's try it this way. It's another way we could try to find that one. So if we go back to P, you can also, if it has more than one matches, like it had 87 matches, we can pick a specific one. So this is 0 based. So that's the first P that it finds. That's the second P that it finds. But it just chains off of that. What about 0? Yep, green. So like part of the challenge with this is that we're using somebody else's code and they didn't make nice selectors for us to use. On your own apps, you can do any number of different strategies to target your elements in durable ways. Ask me some questions about this.
Mine is throwing a 403 error, but I've like triple checked the URL and I've copied and pasted it.
You might have gotten banned because like, I don't know, drizzly.com isn't, they might like have detected that you're using a robot and like, you're not allowed to use robots on our site.
Okay.
So that's my guess there. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, I got banned as well.
Yeah.
Well, that speaks well to Drizzly's security. All right, but this is the general idea with this. So we're gonna do one more. This one, we'll use the actual Cypress site. So I'll throw the URL in chat. Cool. So this is where we want to go. And I want to see if you can assert. Let's see, does this have a nice one? Yeah, see if you can assert that this H1 says querying. Go. Slack me when you got it. Mr. Navoy's got it. Tony Kim's got it. Looking good, Brooke. Looking good, Haley. Cool. So, I'm going to say that we can write some basic Cypress assertions. If you'd like to see some other ones in the flawless execution, Logan. Very good. So if you'd like to see all of them, if you go to the Cypress website, and go down to references and assertions. These are all the ones that you can do. They come from Chai. Cypress is a mashup of like 4 different testing tools. And the syntax is like kind of confusing here. You do put it in quotes when you're using should with Cypress, but this gives you an idea of roughly how those work. One of the things that like takes a lot of getting used to with these kinds of like dot separated assertions is that these words in particular don't mean anything. They just make it read like a sentence. And so like to and be, nope. You can do expect to dot one of and then this array and it works exactly the same, but it makes it read more like a sentence. And this is all the ones that they have built in. So like have was one of our chainers, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Have is a meaningless chainer, but text. Let's see, where's. So here's some other examples. Have length, that's really good for testing lists. To not have class. Have value, not contain. Be visible is kind of cool because something might be in the DOM, but it might have something else on top of it. Checkboxes. So those are super handy. All right, so our last objective is to write basic Cypress actions. These are crazy easy. I'm going to show you 2 of them. So we could do something like get some button and click it. Ta-da, done. Let's say we had some form, an input in it. Ta-da, done. So you're like, oh, well, see, the thing is, well, I log in. All right, so that means maybe you find an input and the one that's like username, and then you type calc overly, and then you get the one for password, and then you type calc overly because it's the same password. And then you get the like login button and click on it. And then you could say, get the H1 should have text something like that. And then maybe I make another test like so maybe I do something like that, but I also want to test that it kicks me out if I got bad ones. It doesn't log in with bad creds. Cool, tests. Ask me some questions.
So with that particular example, we're visiting the site twice. How would you chain that so that you don't have to do the longest request?
You're beautiful. So a couple things. You generally want these to be at least relatively independent from each other. So I would recommend going to the site in each one, typing it out like this every time. That sort of sucks. So one of the other neat things about describes is you can do this thing called a before each. It just takes in a function and it does all of the things in that function before each of the tests. So we could move that into here. And now it's going to do that same thing. I mean, I could presumably do that too, but I think that makes a little bit less sense. Makes the test harder to read. Before each of the things on fake site, start by going to the site, and then our tests describe the thing that's different between them. There's some advice on the site, on the Cypress site, that I think is sound, which is like, be careful about making these too atomic, because it will just slow your test down a lot. Navigating somewhere in a browser takes a long time. It's probably going to be the slowest part of your test. So you don't want to do that if you don't have to. But that said, you do want, if this fails and this doesn't, I want to be able to isolate why. And so taking out things that could pollute the test, I think makes them more useful. Good question. More questions about how actions work, typing and clicking. All right, let's find something we want to assert. Go back over to the Cypress page. Clicking that button do something? No. Click on that, do something? What about?
You had us send you emails last time with your website.
yeah, I did. Oh, that's right. I did do that. Yeah, let's do that. I'm into that. Good call, Logan. So we'll do calcoverly.com. Which, a little slow on the typography loading. There we go. So all the way down at the bottom of kylecoberly.com, we can fill out this. You can tell me your name and then click on this button. So that is my challenge to you, kylecoberly.com. I will obviously know if this worked if you tell me your name. Go ahead and give this a shot. Remember, all we got to do is select the element, and then we can .type or .click to do something. Bonus points. See if you can get it to match the little like flash message that comes up afterward that lets you know it was successful. Go for it. All right, Slack me what you got. Oh, actually, let me just check my email. I would also love to see your code if you could send it over to me. We got someone. They're starting to roll in now. I like it. Okay, that one's ID is email. That one's ID is message. So I could say sci.get email and then type file.coverly at fartiron.com and get message. And Mr. Navoy had a clever way of doing this one. So we could do something like get type submit and then click on it. That'll work. Michael, what did you do?
I went and got the whole form, and then I went to Cypress's documentation, and they have like a submit. So you just .submit.
Indeed. So I could do something like contact form .submit also. So if I do such a thing, oops, I gotta go to the site first. Goes to the site, fills out the stuff, submits it. Your message was sent. What say you, phone? Oh, if I can't see myself. It works, baby. Ask me some questions. Pew. Any other questions about testing in general? Going once. Going twice. Thanks so much for spending some time on testing with me. This is also one of my favorite things to talk about. So if you'd like to go deeper, ask me sometime. Elsewise, happy projecting.